A long, long time ago, before the world had shape or life, there was nothing but darkness and silence, an endless void with no sun, no stars, no trees or animals. Only God was there, full of love and power, ready to create something beautiful. He had a grand vision, a plan to craft a world bursting with light, color, and life, where everything would work together like a perfect song. This is the story of how God made the heavens and the earth, a tale that shows his endless creativity and care, a beginning that sets the foundation for every story that follows in the Bible. It's a story to remind us that everything we see, the sky, the seas, the creatures, and ourselves, comes from God's heart. God started with a single word. His voice, warm and mighty, cut through the darkness like a gentle breeze that could shape the universe. "Let there be light," he said, and suddenly a brilliant glow filled the void, sparkling and warm. Chased away the shadows, bringing life to the emptiness. God looked at the light and smiled. It was good, exactly as he wanted. He separated the light from the darkness, calling the light day and the darkness night. The world now had a rhythm, a dance of morning and evening, sunrise and sunset. That was the first day when time itself began, a moment when God's creation took its first breath. On the second day, God turned his attention to the vast, endless waters that swirled in the new light. He wanted to make room for more beauty, so he spoke again. "Let there be a sky," he said, and the waters began to move. Some rose up, forming fluffy clouds that drifted high, while others stayed below, calm and still. Between them stretched a wide blue sky, clear and boundless, a canvas for the sun to shine and birds to soar. The sky was like a giant dome, holding the promise of life to come. God looked at the sky with its soft blues and wispy clouds and knew it was good, a perfect piece of his growing world. The third day brought even more wonders. God gathered the waters below the sky into one place, letting patches of dry ground peek through. He called the ground land and the waters seas, shaping rivers, lakes, and oceans that sparkled under the light. The land was rich, like a canvas waiting for color, so God spoke again. "Let the earth grow plants and trees," he said, and the ground came alive. Green grass carpeted the hills, wildflowers bloomed in reds, yellows, and purples, and trees stretched tall, their branches heavy with fruit. There were apple trees with crisp, red apples, fig trees with sweet, soft fruit, and olive trees shimmering with silvery leaves. Fields of wheat swayed gently, ready to feed the creatures to come. God looked at the land and seas, the plants and trees, and saw they were good, a living, breathing home taking shape. On the fourth day, God turned to the sky again, wanting to give it light and order. "Let there be lights in the sky," he said, and a blazing sun rose, its golden rays warming the earth and making the flowers glow. At night, a gentle moon appeared, casting a soft silver light, and countless stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across the heavens. These lights weren't just beautiful, they would mark time, guiding days, months, and seasons. The sun would wake the world each morning, the moon would soothe it at night, and the stars would whisper stories of God's greatness. God saw the sun, moon, and stars and knew they were good, lighting up his creation with warmth and wonder. The fifth day was for the creatures of the sea and sky. God spoke, and the oceans burst with life. Fish of every kind swam through the waters, tiny minnows darting in schools, colorful coral fish weaving through reefs, and massive whales gliding through the deep. Dolphins leaped playfully, and turtles paddled slowly, each one perfectly suited to its home. In the sky, birds took flight, their wings catching the breeze. Sparrows chirped cheerful songs, eagles soared with sharp eyes, and doves cooed softly as they nested in trees. The seas and skies were alive with movement and sound, a symphony of life. God smiled at the fish and birds, pleased with the joy they brought to his world. On the sixth day, God filled the land with animals. He spoke, and the earth brought forth creatures of every kind. Lions roared proudly in the grasslands, their manes golden in the sun. Deer leaped through forests, their hooves light on the ground. Elephants lumbered across plains, their trunks swinging, while tiny ants marched in neat rows, working together. Monkeys chattered in the trees, and bright parrots flashed their colors. Each animal was unique, from the smallest beetle to the tallest giraffe, all fitting perfectly into God's design. But God had one more special creation in mind, something different from all the rest. God decided to make people beings who could love, think, and care for his world. He shaped a man from the dust of the earth, breathing life into him, and called him Adam. Then from Adam he made a woman, Eve, to be his partner and friend. They were special, made in God's own image, with hearts to love, minds to dream, and hands to build. God placed them in a garden called Eden, a paradise with clear rivers, lush trees, and every fruit they could want, juicy pomegranates, sweet grapes, and golden dates. He told them to tend the garden, to enjoy its beauty, and to live in harmony with the animals and plants. God looked at Adam and Eve, the animals, and the whole world, and he saw it was very good, a masterpiece of his love. On the seventh day, God paused. He didn't rest because he was tired, but because he wanted to enjoy his creation, to savor the beauty of the world he'd made. He blessed this day, making it a time of peace, a moment to reflect on the wonder of life. Adam and Eve walked in Eden, laughing under the shade of trees, surrounded by animals that roamed without fear. The rivers sparkled, the birds sang, and the stars shone brightly at night. They were happy, living close to God, who loved them like a father loves his children. But this perfect beginning came with a choice. God gave Adam and Eve one rule: not to eat from a certain tree in the garden called the tree of knowing good and evil. They could enjoy every other fruit, every flower, every corner of Eden, but this tree was different. It was a test of their trust, a way to show they would listen to God's voice. For now the world was new, alive, and perfect, a gift from God's heart. But this rule would shape the next part of their story, a tale of choice and consequence. This story of creation is the first in the Bible, a picture of God's power to make beauty from nothing. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought, a world crafted with love where every sunrise, bird, and flower comes from God's kind hands. It reminds us we're part of something big, a world God made and called good, where he's always near, watching over us with care. In the beginning, after God created the heavens and the earth, he made a special place called Eden, a garden so beautiful it was like a piece of heaven on earth. Rivers sparkled through green meadows, flowers bloomed in every color, and trees heavy with fruit, pomegranates, figs, and grapes, swayed in a gentle breeze. Animals roamed freely, from playful deer to chirping birds, all living in peace. This was the home God gave to Adam and Eve, the first man and woman created in his own image to love, care for, and enjoy his world. But this story isn't just about a perfect garden. It's about a choice, a mistake, and God's love that never gives up. A tale that shows how even when we stumble, God is there to guide us back. Adam and Eve were happy in Eden. They walked hand in hand, laughing as they named the animals, calling the big striped creature a tiger and the long-necked one a giraffe. They ate sweet fruit, drank from clear streams, and talked with God as a friend, feeling his love like warm sunlight. God gave them everything they needed with one simple rule: they could eat from any tree in the garden except one, called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It stood tall in the center, its fruit tempting but forbidden. God warned them that eating it would bring trouble, a way of saying, "Trust me and you'll stay safe." Adam and Eve nodded, trusting God's care, happy to enjoy the rest of Eden's wonders. But there was someone else in the garden, a cunning creature shaped like a snake, who didn't want Adam and Eve to trust God. This snake was sly, twisting words to cause doubt. One day, as Eve walked near the forbidden tree, the snake slithered up and spoke. "Did God really say you can't eat from any tree?" he asked, his voice smooth and tricky. Eve shook her head, explaining they could eat from every tree except this one, or they'd face trouble. The snake smirked. "You won't die. God just doesn't want you to be as wise as he is. Eat the fruit and you'll know everything, good and evil." Eve looked at the tree. The fruit was shiny, red, and smelled sweet. Maybe the snake was right. Maybe God was holding something back. She hesitated, then picked the fruit, took a bite, and handed it to Adam, who was with her. He ate too, wanting to share in her choice. As soon as they ate, something changed. Their eyes opened, but not to wisdom. Instead, they felt shame for the first time. They noticed they were bare and grabbed fig leaves to cover themselves, sewing them into makeshift clothes. The joy of Eden faded, replaced by a heavy feeling like a storm cloud over their hearts. They heard God walking in the garden, his presence once comforting but now frightening. Adam and Eve hid among the trees, their hearts pounding, hoping God wouldn't find them. But God, who sees everything, called out, "Adam, where are you?" His voice was kind but firm, like a parent searching for a lost child. Adam stepped out, trembling, and admitted they were hiding because they felt ashamed. God asked, "Did you eat from the tree I told you not to?" Adam pointed to Eve, saying, "She gave it to me." Eve, nervous, pointed to the snake, saying, "He tricked me." God looked at them all, seeing their choices. He spoke to the snake first, saying it would crawl on its belly forever, always at odds with people. To Eve, he said life would be harder now, with pain in bringing new life and struggles in her partnership with Adam. To Adam, he said the ground would be tough to work, growing thorns instead of just fruit, and life would be a toil until he returned to the dust he came from. These weren't just punishments, they were the natural results of choosing their own way over God's. The fruit didn't bring wisdom, it brought separation, a break in the closeness they had with God and each other. But God didn't abandon them. He made clothes from animal skins, covering their shame with care, showing he still loved them. Then, to protect them, he sent them out of Eden, placing a shining angel with a flaming sword to guard the garden's entrance, so they couldn't return and eat from the tree of life, which would trap them in their broken state forever. Adam and Eve left Eden, stepping into a world that wasn't as perfect anymore. They would face hard work, pain, and challenges, but God's love followed them. He promised that one day someone would come from their family to crush the snake's power, a hint of hope that God had a plan to fix what was broken. They settled outside Eden, starting a new life, farming the land and raising children. The garden was gone, but God's presence wasn't. He was still with them, guiding them through their mistakes. This story of Adam and Eve is about trust, temptation, and second chances. It shows how easy it is to listen to the wrong voice, to want more than what God gives. But it also shows God's heart. When we fall, he doesn't turn away. He stays close, offering love and a way forward. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. No matter how we mess up, God is like a loving parent, ready to cover us with care and guide us back to him, just as he did for Adam and Eve in the beginning. Long after Adam and Eve left Eden, the world filled with people, families, villages, and towns spread across the earth. But something sad happened. Instead of living with love and kindness as God intended, many people turned to selfish ways, hurting each other and ignoring God's voice. The world became a place of greed and fighting, like a garden overgrown with weeds. God looked at his creation and felt heartbroken, seeing how far people had strayed. But there was one man, Noah, who stood out. He was kind, honest, and faithful, always trying to live the way God wanted. This is the story of Noah and the Ark, a tale of obedience, rescue, and a fresh start, showing that God keeps his promises even in the toughest times. Noah lived with his wife, their 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their families. He wasn't perfect, but he loved God and tried to do what was right. One day, God spoke to Noah with a serious message. He said the world had become so broken that he would send a great flood to wash it clean, starting over with Noah and his family. But God had a plan to save them. He told Noah to build a huge boat, an ark, big enough to hold his family and animals of every kind. God gave him exact instructions. Make it from strong wood, cover it with pitch to keep it waterproof, and build it with rooms for everyone. The ark was to be enormous, longer than a village street, wide as a marketplace, and tall as a tower. Noah listened carefully, even though the idea sounded strange. A flood? In a dry land where rain was rare? People around him laughed as he started cutting trees and shaping planks under the hot sun. His neighbors mocked him, calling him foolish for building a boat nowhere near water. But Noah trusted God. Day after day, he worked with his sons, hammering nails and sealing gaps, while his wife and daughters-in-law prepared food and supplies. The ark took shape, a giant wooden home that would float on the coming waters. Noah's faith kept him going, even when others doubted. Then God told Noah to gather animals. Not just a few, but pairs of every kind, lions with shaggy manes, elephants with swinging trunks, tiny sparrows, and even creeping lizards. God wanted to save his creatures too, so their kinds could live on. Noah and his family worked hard, leading animals into the ark's rooms. Giraffes ducked through the doors, monkeys chattered as they climbed aboard, and turtles plodded slowly inside. There were clean animals like sheep in groups of 7 and others like wolves in pairs. Noah made sure every creature had a place, trusting God's plan even when it felt overwhelming. When the ark was ready, God told Noah and his family to go inside. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives, 8 people in all, entered the ark with the animals. Then God himself closed the door, sealing it tight. For 7 days they waited, the world outside quiet except for the animals' soft noises. Then the sky darkened. Rain began to fall, not a gentle sprinkle but a torrent like rivers pouring from the heavens. Springs burst from the ground and water rose higher and higher, covering fields, hills, and even mountains. The ark lifted, floating on the flood as the world below disappeared under the waves. For 40 days and nights the rain fell and the waters grew deep. Noah and his family cared for the animals, feeding the horses, calming the birds, and cleaning the stalls. It wasn't easy, cramped, noisy, and dark, but they trusted God was with them. Outside, the flood swept away the old, broken world, but inside the ark, life was safe. Noah's wife cooked simple meals, and the family prayed together, thankful for God's protection. The animals, from roaring lions to cooing doves, seemed to sense they were part of something bigger, a rescue plan from God. After the rain stopped, the waters stayed high for months. Noah waited patiently, trusting God's timing. One day, he sent out a raven, but it flew back and forth, finding no dry place to land. Later, he tried a dove. It returned too, tired and empty-handed. A week later, Noah sent the dove again, and this time it came back with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. Noah's heart lifted. Land was out there and plants were growing again. A week later, the dove flew out and didn't return, a sign the earth was drying. God finally told Noah, "It's time to leave the ark." Noah opened the door and sunlight poured in. The family stepped onto dry ground, breathing fresh air with animals bounding out behind them, elephants trumpeting, deer leaping, and birds soaring into the sky. The world felt new, washed clean, ready for a fresh start. Noah built an altar, a pile of stones, and thanked God with an offering, his heart full of gratitude. God was pleased and made a promise. He would never again send a flood to cover the whole earth. As a sign, he set a rainbow in the sky, its colors arcing across the clouds, a reminder of his love and faithfulness. Noah and his family settled in the new world, planting crops and building homes. Their children grew and new generations began, spreading across the earth. The rainbow became a symbol for all people, a promise that God cares even when the world seems lost. This story of Noah shows that God sees the good in us, even in a broken world, and offers a way to start again. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting picture. God is like a safe ark, protecting us through storms, guiding us to new beginnings with a promise as bright as a rainbow. Many years after Noah's Ark, the world was full of people again, living in villages and cities, farming fields, and building homes. Among them was a man named Abram, who lived in a bustling city called Ur, near wide rivers and busy markets. Abram was kind and hardworking, married to Sarai, a woman known for her beauty and wisdom. They had a good life with flocks of sheep and goats, but one thing made their hearts ache. They had no children and they were growing old. This is the story of Abram and Sarai, who became Abraham and Sarah, a tale of trusting God's promises even when they seemed impossible, showing that God keeps his word in his own time. One day, when Abram was 75, God spoke to him in a way that felt like a warm, clear voice in his heart. "Leave your home, your family, and your city," God said, "and go to a new land I'll show you. I'll make you the father of a great nation, bless you, and make your name known everywhere." It was a big ask. Leave everything familiar for an unknown place with no map or plan except God's words. But Abram trusted God. He talked to Sarai, and together they packed their tents, gathered their animals, and set out with their nephew Lot and their workers. They left Ur, heading toward a land called Canaan, a place of rolling hills, olive trees, and green valleys. The journey wasn't easy. They traveled through deserts where the sun burned hot and nights grew cold. They crossed rivers and camped under starry skies, trusting God to guide them. When they reached Canaan, God spoke again. "This is the land I'll give to your family." Abram built an altar of stones to thank God, his heart full of hope. But life in Canaan had challenges. The land was shared with other tribes, and there wasn't always enough water or grass for everyone's animals. Abram and Lot's herds grew so big that their workers argued over grazing land. Abram, wanting peace, let Lot choose where to settle. Lot picked the lush Jordan Valley near cities while Abram stayed in Canaan's hills. God blessed Abram's kindness, promising again that his family would be as countless as the dust of the earth. Years passed, and Abram and Sarai still had no children. Sarai was now too old to have a baby, and doubt crept into their hearts. One night, God showed Abram the stars and said, "Your family will be as many as these." Abram believed, even though it seemed impossible. To show his promise was real, God changed their names. Abram became Abraham, meaning father of many, and Sarai became Sarah, meaning princess. But waiting was hard. Sarah, feeling desperate, suggested Abraham have a child with her servant Hagar. Hagar had a son Ishmael, but this wasn't God's full plan. Tensions grew, and Hagar and Ishmael left, though God promised to care for them too. When Abraham was 99 and Sarah 90, God spoke again, promising a son from Sarah herself. Abraham laughed, thinking it was too late, and Sarah chuckled too when she overheard. But God said, "Name him Isaac," meaning laughter, because I can do anything. One day, 3 mysterious visitors came to Abraham's tent. They looked like travelers, but their words carried God's power. They said Sarah would have a baby within a year. Sarah, listening behind the tent flap, laughed quietly, but the visitors knew. "Why did you laugh?" they asked. "Nothing is too hard for God." Abraham sensed these were no ordinary men. God was speaking through them. Sure enough, a year later, Sarah gave birth to Isaac, a healthy boy. Laughter filled their tent, not from doubt but from joy. Abraham and Sarah held their son, amazed at God's faithfulness. They celebrated with feasts, sharing their happiness with their workers and neighbors. Isaac grew strong, and Abraham taught him about God, passing on the promise of a great nation. But God had one more test for Abraham's faith. When Isaac was a young man, God asked Abraham to do something unthinkable: offer Isaac as a sacrifice on a mountain. Abraham's heart broke, but he trusted God. He took Isaac to the mountain, carrying wood and fire. Isaac, curious, asked, "Where's the lamb for the offering?" Abraham answered, "God will provide." The mountain, Abraham built an altar and prepared to obey, though his hands trembled. Isaac, trusting his father, lay on the altar. But at the last moment, God called out, "Stop! Don't harm the boy." A ram appeared in a nearby bush, and Abraham sacrificed it instead, thanking God with tears. God spoke again, "Because you trusted me, I'll bless you with a family as many as the stars and sand." Abraham and Isaac returned home, their faith stronger, knowing God's love was sure. Abraham and Sarah lived long lives, seeing Isaac grow and marry. When they died, they were buried in Canaan, the land God promised. Their story spread, and their family grew, becoming the start of a great nation, just as God said. This story of Abraham and Sarah is about trusting God when things seem impossible. It shows that waiting is hard, but God's promises come true in His perfect time. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a guide on a long journey, leading us through doubts and deserts to a place of joy, holding us close with promises that never fail. Generations after Abraham and Sarah, their family grew into a large clan, living in the land of Canaan. Among them was a young man named Joseph, one of 12 brothers, born to Jacob, Abraham's grandson. Joseph was special to his father, who gave him a colorful coat, bright with stripes of red, blue, and gold, a sign of his love. But this favor caused trouble, and Joseph's dreams of greatness stirred up even more. This is the story of Joseph and his brothers, a tale of jealousy, forgiveness, and God's plan to turn hardship into hope, showing that even when life feels unfair, God is weaving a bigger story for good. Joseph was 17, full of energy and dreams. He worked with his brothers, tending their father's flocks of sheep and goats in Canaan's hills. But his brothers didn't like him much. Jacob openly loved Joseph best, and that colorful coat made them jealous. To make matters worse, Joseph had dreams that seemed to say he'd one day be greater than them all. In one dream, their bundles of wheat bowed to his, and in another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to him. When Joseph shared these dreams, his brothers fumed. "Do you think you'll rule over us?" they grumbled. Even Jacob scolded him, though he wondered if the dreams meant something special. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were herding sheep far from home. They saw him coming, his bright coat flashing in the sun, and their jealousy boiled over. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered. They plotted to kill him and throw him into a dry well, blaming wild animals. But Reuben, the oldest, didn't want murder. "Just put him in the well," he said, planning to rescue him later. So they grabbed Joseph, tore off his coat, and tossed him into the pit, ignoring his cries. As they ate lunch, a caravan of traders passed by, heading to Egypt with spices and goods. Judah, another brother, suggested, "Why kill him? Let's sell him." They pulled Joseph out and sold him for silver coins to the traders, who took him away. Reuben was horrified, but it was too late. They dipped Joseph's coat in goat's blood and showed it to Jacob, who wept, believing his son was dead. Joseph, now a slave, was taken to Egypt, a land of grand rivers and towering pyramids. He was sold to Potiphar, a rich official in Pharaoh's court. Joseph was scared but trusted God. He worked hard and God blessed him, making everything he did successful. Potiphar noticed and put him in charge of his house. But trouble came again. Potiphar's wife lied about Joseph, angry that he wouldn't do wrong with her. Joseph was thrown into prison, innocent but trapped. Even there, God stayed with him. Joseph was kind to the other prisoners, and the jailer trusted him, giving him responsibilities. In prison, Joseph met two of Pharaoh's servants who had strange dreams. Joseph, with God's help, explained them. One servant would be freed, the other punished. It happened just as he said, but the freed servant forgot about Joseph. Years passed, and Joseph stayed in prison, now a grown man. Then Pharaoh, Egypt's king, had troubling dreams: 7 fat cows eaten by 7 skinny ones, and 7 healthy wheat stalks swallowed by 7 thin ones. No one could explain them until the servant remembered Joseph. They brought him from prison, his face tired but hopeful. Joseph told Pharaoh, "God is warning you. 7 years of plenty are coming, followed by 7 years of famine." He suggested storing food during the good years to survive the bad. Pharaoh was amazed and put Joseph in charge of Egypt, second only to him. Joseph wore fine robes, rode a chariot, and oversaw granaries filled with grain, preparing for the famine. When the famine hit, it reached Canaan, where Jacob and his sons struggled. Jacob sent his brothers to Egypt to buy food. They came to Joseph, now a powerful man, but didn't recognize him in his Egyptian robes. Joseph knew them instantly, his brothers, older and weathered. His heart stirred, but he tested them, asking about their family and keeping one brother, Simeon, until they brought their youngest, Benjamin. They returned home, told Jacob, and later came back with Benjamin. Joseph saw Benjamin, his only full brother, and nearly wept. He invited them to a feast, watching them closely. Were they still cruel? To test them, he hid a silver cup in Benjamin's sack and accused him of stealing. Judah, who'd once sold Joseph, begged to take Benjamin's place, showing he'd changed. Joseph couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streaming, he said, "I'm Joseph, your brother." His brothers froze, afraid he'd punish them. But Joseph hugged them, saying, "Don't be afraid. God sent me here to save lives." He meant harm, but God used it for good. He sent them to bring Jacob and their families to Egypt, where they'd be safe. Jacob, overjoyed to learn Joseph was alive, moved to Egypt with the whole family, 70 people. Pharaoh gave them good land in Goshen, and Joseph made sure they had food. Jacob lived happily, seeing his son again, and died in peace, blessing his sons. Joseph's story spread, showing how God took a boy's pain and turned it into a plan to save many. His forgiveness healed his family, and they grew strong in Egypt. This story of Joseph is about trusting God through betrayal and hardship. Shows that God can take the worst moments and make them part of something beautiful. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a master weaver, turning broken threads into a tapestry of hope, guiding us through pain to a place of love and reunion. Years after Joseph brought his family to Egypt, their descendants, called the Israelites, grew into a large people. They lived in Goshen, farming and raising families, but a new Pharaoh rose who didn't remember Joseph's help. He saw the Israelites as a threat and made them slaves, forcing them to build cities under the hot sun, their lives bitter with hard work. Yet God saw their suffering and had a plan to set them free. This is the story of Moses and the Exodus, a tale of courage, miracles, and God's power to rescue his people, showing that even in the darkest times, God hears our cries and leads us to freedom. Among the Israelites was a baby boy named Moses, born to a woman named Jochebed. Pharaoh had ordered all Israelite baby boys to be thrown into the Nile River, fearing their numbers. But Jochebed couldn't let her son die. She wove a basket from reeds, sealed it with pitch, and hid Moses inside, setting it among the river's tall grasses. His sister, Miriam, watched from a distance. Pharaoh's daughter found the basket while bathing and saw the crying baby. Her heart softened, and she decided to keep him. Miriam stepped forward, offering to find a nurse, and cleverly brought Jochebed to care for Moses. He grew up in the palace, raised as an Egyptian prince, but knowing he was an Israelite. As a young man, Moses saw the slaves suffering. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite and, in anger, killed the Egyptian, hiding the body. But the act was discovered, and Moses fled to Midian, a desert land far away. There, he became a shepherd, marrying Zipporah, a kind woman, and starting a family. He thought his days of greatness were over, tending sheep in the quiet hills. But God had other plans. One day, while Moses led his flock, he saw a bush burning with fire but not burning up. Curious, he approached, and God's voice called from the flames, "Moses, I am the God of Abraham. I've seen my people's pain in Egypt, and I'm sending you to free them." Moses hesitated, feeling unworthy. "I'm not a good speaker," he said. "Who will listen to me?" But God promised to be with him, giving him signs. His staff turned into a snake, then back again, and his hand became sick, then healed. God said Moses' brother Aaron would help him speak. Moses obeyed, returning to Egypt with his family. He and Aaron went to Pharaoh, saying, "God says, let my people go to worship him." Pharaoh laughed, refusing, and made the slaves work harder, forcing them to make bricks without straw. The Israelites grumbled, but Moses trusted God. God sent 10 plagues to show Pharaoh his power. First, the Nile turned to blood, making the water undrinkable. Then frogs swarmed the land, followed by gnats and flies. Livestock died, boils struck the Egyptians, and hail destroyed crops. Locusts ate what was left, and darkness covered Egypt for 3 days. Each time, Pharaoh refused to free the Israelites. Finally, God warned of a last plague, the death of every firstborn. He told the Israelites to mark their doors with lamb's blood so the plague would pass over them. That night the plague struck, and Pharaoh, grieving his own son, told Moses to take his people and leave. The Israelites, hundreds of thousands, left quickly, taking bread without yeast, their belongings and treasures from the Egyptians. Moses led them toward the Red Sea, with Pharaoh's army chasing them. Trapped between the sea and the soldiers, the people panicked, but Moses trusted God. He raised his staff, and God sent a strong wind, parting the sea into 2 walls of water with dry ground between. The Israelites walked through, amazed, as fish swam in the walls beside them. When Pharaoh's army followed, the waters crashed back, swallowing them. The Israelites sang with joy, free at last. Moses led them into the desert, heading for Canaan, the land God promised Abraham. But the journey was hard. They grew thirsty, and God told Moses to strike a rock, bringing water. They were hungry, and God sent manna, a sweet bread-like food, every morning, and quail for meat. Mount Sinai, God called Moses up the mountain, giving him rules to live by, written on stone tablets, ways to love God and each other. People promised to obey, but while Moses was gone, they built a golden calf to worship, forgetting God. Moses was angry, breaking the tablets, but God forgave them, giving new ones. Moses' face glowed from being near God, showing his special role. The Israelites traveled for years, learning to trust God. Moses guided them, settling disputes and teaching God's ways. But they often complained, and once Moses doubted God's plan, striking a rock instead of speaking to it as God said. For this, God said Moses wouldn't enter Canaan. Still, Moses led faithfully until he was old. From a mountain, he saw the promised land, green and beautiful, before he died. His people mourned, but his work lived on, leading them to freedom. This story of Moses is about God's power to save and guide. It shows that God hears us when we're hurting and sends help, even if it takes time. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a light in the dark, leading us through impossible moments to a place of safety, just as he led Moses and his people to freedom. After Moses led the Israelites to the promised land, they settled in Canaan, but their story continued with leaders called judges and kings. One young shepherd boy named David would become a great king, but his courage started with a giant challenge. This is the story of David and Goliath, a tale of a small boy facing a big enemy, trusting God's power over human strength, showing that God chooses the humble to do great things. It's a story to remind us that no matter how big our problems seem, God is always bigger, fighting for us with love and might. David lived in Bethlehem, a small town in the hills of Judah, with his father Jesse and 8 brothers. He was the youngest, left behind to tend the sheep while his brothers went to war. David loved his job, playing a harp to calm the flock and watching over them at night. He faced dangers. Lions and bears tried to attack the sheep, but David, with God's help, chased them away, protecting his flock. David's heart was full of songs and prayers, praising God for his goodness. He wasn't a warrior or a king, just a boy with a sling and stones, but God saw something special in him. The Israelites were fighting the Philistines, a people from the coast with strong armies. 2 sides faced each other in the valley of Elah, a wide, dusty place between hills. The Philistines had a champion, a giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, with armor like a wall and a spear as heavy as a beam. Every day, Goliath shouted across the valley, mocking the Israelites. "Send your best fighter. If he wins, we'll be your servants. If I win, you'll serve us." The Israelites, including King Saul, were terrified. No one dared face him, and their armies stayed hidden in fear. One day, David's father sent him to the battlefield with food for his brothers. As David arrived, he heard Goliath's taunts and saw the soldiers cower. David was shocked. "How is this giant to defy God's people?" he asked. His brothers laughed, saying, "Go back to your sheep." But David went to King Saul, offering to fight. Saul looked at the young shepherd and said, "You're too small." David replied, "God helped me kill lions and bears. He'll help me with this giant." Saul gave him his armor, but it was too heavy, so David chose his shepherd's staff, sling, and 5 smooth stones from a stream. He trusted God, not fancy weapons. The next morning, Goliath came out, ready for battle. When he saw David, he laughed. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" he roared. David stood tall and said, "You come with sword and spear, but I come in God's name. He'll give me the victory to show the world he's real." The giant charged, but David ran forward, put a stone in his sling, and swung it. The stone flew true, hitting Goliath on the forehead. The giant fell like a tree, stunned. David ran to him, took Goliath's sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines fled in panic, and the Israelites chased them, winning the day. King Saul was amazed. He brought David to his court, where David became a friend to Saul's son Jonathan and played music to calm Saul's troubled heart. David's courage spread, and the people sang songs about him. "Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." Saul grew jealous, trying to kill David, but God protected him. David hid in caves and forests, always trusting God. Jonathan helped him, and David spared Saul's life twice when he could have ended him, showing mercy. Eventually, Saul died in battle and David became king of Judah, then all Israel. He brought the people together, building a strong nation, and danced with joy when he brought God's special box, the Ark, to Jerusalem. David was a good king, but he made mistakes too, like taking another man's wife, which brought trouble. God forgave him when he said sorry, showing his love never ends. David's life was full of highs and lows, but his faith in God made him a hero. He wrote many songs praising God's strength and kindness. His family line led to Jesus, the greatest king of all. This story of David and Goliath is about facing fears with faith. Shows that God uses small people to do big things, turning giants into stories of victory. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a shepherd watching over us, helping us stand tall against any storm with a heart full of love. Centuries after David's time, the Israelites faced new challenges. Their nation had split, and many were taken far from home to Babylon, a grand city with tall walls and golden statues. Among them was a young man named Daniel, who loved God and stayed faithful even in a strange land. This is the story of Daniel in the lion's den, a tale of courage, prayer, and God's protection, showing that trusting God can keep us safe through danger, like a light shining in the darkest night. It's a story to remind us that God is always near, guarding us when we stand firm in faith. Daniel was a teenager when he was taken to Babylon after the king Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. He and his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were chosen to serve in the king's court because they were smart and strong. The Babylonians gave them new names. Daniel became Belteshazzar, and his friends were called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were trained in Babylonian ways, learning the language and customs, but Daniel stayed true to God's rules. When offered rich food that went against his faith, he asked for vegetables and water instead. God blessed him, making him healthier and wiser than others, and he rose to a high position in the king's service. Years later, a new king, Darius, ruled the land now called Persia. Daniel's wisdom and honesty made him a favorite, and Darius put him in charge of many leaders. But this made other officials jealous. They wanted to get rid of Daniel but couldn't find fault in his work. So they schemed, knowing Daniel prayed to God 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem. They tricked Darius into signing a law. For 30 days, no one could pray to anyone but the king, or they'd be thrown into a den of lions. Darius, not seeing the trap, agreed. Daniel heard the law but didn't change his ways. He went to his room, opened the window toward Jerusalem, and prayed as always, thanking God and asking for help. The jealous officials spied on him and ran to Darius, saying, "Daniel's breaking your law." Darius was upset. He liked Daniel, but the law couldn't be changed. With a heavy heart, he ordered Daniel thrown into the lion's den, a deep pit with hungry lions. As Daniel was lowered in, Darius called out, "May your God save you." He sealed the den with a stone and spent the night worrying, unable to sleep. The lions were fierce, their roars echoing in the dark. But God sent an angel to shut their mouths. Daniel sat calmly, trusting God, and the lions lay down around him like big cats resting peacefully. He wasn't afraid. His faith was stronger than the lion's teeth. All night, God kept him safe, and Daniel prayed, feeling God's presence like a warm blanket in the cold pit. At dawn, Darius ran to the den, calling, "Daniel, is your God able to save you?" To his amazement, Daniel answered, "Yes, King." God sent his angel, and the lions didn't touch me because I'm innocent. Darius was overjoyed. He ordered Daniel lifted out, and not a scratch was found on him. King then punished the jealous officials, throwing them into the den where the lions attacked at once. Darius made a new law, telling everyone to respect Daniel's God who saves his people. Daniel's faith didn't just save him, it showed others God's power. He continued serving Darius and later kings, always staying true. His friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego also faced a test earlier, refusing to bow to a giant golden statue. They were thrown into a fiery furnace but walked out unharmed, with an angel beside them, proving God's protection again. Daniel's life was full of moments like these, showing that God honors those who trust him even far from home. This story of Daniel in the lion's den is about standing firm no matter the cost. Shows that God is stronger than any danger, protecting those who pray and trust him. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a shield, keeping us safe in scary places, watching over us with love that never fails, just as he did for Daniel in the den of lions. Long after Daniel's time, the Israelites were back in their land, but many still struggled to follow God's ways. Among them was a man named Jonah, a prophet who carried God's messages to his people. Jonah lived in a time when the city of Nineveh, capital of the powerful Assyrian Empire, was known for its cruelty and sin. This is the story of Jonah and the whale, a tale of running from God, finding forgiveness, and learning that God's love reaches everyone, even those we think don't deserve it. It's a story to remind us that God's mercy is bigger than our fears, guiding us back to him, even when we try to swim away. One day, God spoke to Jonah with a clear command. Go to Nineveh and tell them to turn from their wicked ways, or I'll judge the city. Jonah was shocked. Nineveh was a huge, bustling place, full of people who didn't know God and often hurt others, including Israelites. Jonah didn't want to go. He thought, why should I help them? They're enemies. Instead of obeying, Jonah decided to run. He went to the port of Joppa, found a ship sailing to Tarshish, far in the opposite direction, and paid for a ticket. He thought he could escape God's call by sailing across the sea, as far away as he could go. Jonah boarded the ship, feeling relieved as it sailed away from Nineveh. But God saw him. As the ship rocked on the waves, a fierce storm blew up. The sky turned black, winds howled, and waves crashed over the deck. The sailors were terrified, throwing cargo overboard to lighten the ship, praying to their gods for help. Jonah, exhausted, was asleep below deck. The captain shook him awake, shouting, "Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he'll save us." The sailors cast lots, throwing marked stones to find out who caused the storm, and the lot pointed to Jonah. He admitted, "I'm running from my God, the one who made the sea and land. This storm is because of me. Throw me overboard and it'll stop." The sailors didn't want to harm Jonah. They rowed harder, but the storm grew worse. Finally, they prayed for forgiveness and threw Jonah into the sea. Instantly, the winds calmed and the waves stilled. The sailors were amazed, praising Jonah's God. But Jonah didn't drown. God sent a great fish, some call it a whale, to swallow him whole. Inside the fish's dark, slimy belly, Jonah was alive but trapped. For 3 days and nights, he sat in the darkness, the smell of seaweed around him, the fish's heartbeat thumping like a drum. Jonah prayed, feeling sorry for running. He thanked God for saving him from drowning and promised to obey. His prayer was like a song, full of hope, trusting God even in the strangest place. On the 3rd day, God made the fish spit Jonah onto dry land. Jonah was soggy, tired, and smelled of fish, but he was alive. God spoke again. "Go to Nineveh and deliver my message." This time, Jonah obeyed. He traveled to Nineveh, a city so big it took 3 days to walk across. Streets were crowded with markets, temples, and people from many lands. Jonah walked through, shouting, "In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed unless you change." He expected them to laugh or ignore him, but something amazing happened. People listened. From the poorest workers to the richest nobles, they believed God's warning. They stopped eating, wore simple clothes, and prayed for mercy, sorry for their wrongs. Even the king of Nineveh heard Jonah's message. He took off his royal robes, put on rough sackcloth, and sat in ashes, a sign of humility. He sent out a decree. Everyone must pray to Jonah's God, stop their evil ways, and be kind instead. The whole city turned to God, hoping for forgiveness. And God saw their changed hearts. He decided not to destroy Nineveh, showing his mercy to a people who turned back to him. Jonah's warning had saved a city of thousands, proving God's love reaches far beyond one nation. But Jonah wasn't happy. He sat outside the city, angry that God spared Nineveh. I knew you'd forgive them, he complained. That's why I ran. They don't deserve mercy. Jonah built a small shelter and sulked under it, waiting to see what would happen. God made a plant grow to shade Jonah from the hot sun, and Jonah was glad for it. But the next day God sent a worm to eat the plant, and it withered. A scorching wind blew, and Jonah felt faint, grumbling, I'd rather die than live like this. God gently asked, Are you angry about a plant that you didn't even grow? If you care about a plant, don't you think I care about Nineveh's people, who were lost but now seek me? Jonah's heart began to soften. He saw that God's love was bigger than his own ideas, reaching even those he thought were too far gone. Jonah returned home, his mission complete, carrying a lesson about God's mercy. The story of Nineveh's change spread, showing that God gives second chances to everyone who turns to him. This story of Jonah is about learning to trust God's heart, even when it's hard to agree. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. God is like a patient parent, chasing after us when we run, saving us in surprising ways and loving even those we struggle to love. Hundreds of years after Jonah, the Israelites lived under Roman rule, longing for a savior to bring them freedom and hope. Prophets had spoken of a Messiah, a king from David's line who would save God's people. In a small town called Nazareth, a young woman named Mary and a carpenter named Joseph were chosen for an incredible role. This is the story of Jesus' birth and life, a tale of love, miracles, and sacrifice, showing that God sent his Son to bring light to a dark world. It's a story to remind us that God is with us, offering love and new life like a star guiding us home. Mary was kind and faithful, engaged to Joseph, a gentle man. One night, an angel named Gabriel appeared to Mary, glowing with light. Don't be afraid, he said. God has chosen you to have a son, Jesus, who will be the Savior, the Son of God. Mary was surprised. She wasn't married yet, but she trusted God, saying, Let it happen as you say. The angel told Joseph in a dream, assuring him to take Mary as his wife. Joseph obeyed, protecting Mary as they prepared for the baby. The Roman emperor ordered a census, requiring everyone to register in their hometown. Joseph and Mary traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem, David's city, a long journey over dusty hills. Mary was close to giving birth, and when they arrived, Bethlehem was crowded. No one had room, so they stayed in a stable, surrounded by animals. There, under a starry sky, Mary gave birth to Jesus, wrapping him in soft cloths and laying him in a manger, a feeding trough for animals. Angels filled the sky, singing to shepherds nearby, Glory to God! A Savior is born. The shepherds ran to see the baby, amazed, and told everyone the good news. Wise men from far away followed a bright star, bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, honoring the newborn king. Jesus grew up in Nazareth, learning carpentry from Joseph and wisdom from God. 12. He amazed teachers in Jerusalem's temple with his understanding. When he was about 30, Jesus began his work, teaching about God's kingdom. He traveled through villages, speaking in simple stories called parables, like one about a lost sheep found by a loving shepherd, showing God's care for everyone. People followed him, drawn to his kind words and warm heart. Jesus did miracles that showed God's power. He healed a blind man, letting him see the blue sky. He calmed a storm on a lake, saving frightened fishermen. Once he fed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish with baskets left over. He even brought a dead man, Lazarus, back to life, calling him out of a tomb. These signs made many believe he was the Messiah, but some leaders were jealous, afraid of his influence. Jesus taught love above all. Love God with all your heart and love others as yourself. He welcomed everyone, from poor fishermen to tax collectors others hated. He ate with them, listened, and showed them God's forgiveness. But his teachings upset powerful priests and Roman rulers, who didn't want a king challenging their control. They plotted against him. One night, Jesus ate a special meal with his 12 closest followers called disciples. He broke bread and shared wine, saying it was a sign of his love, asking them to remember him. He knew his time was short. A disciple, Judas, betrayed him for silver, leading soldiers to arrest Jesus in a garden. The others ran, scared. Jesus was taken to the leaders, who accused him of false crimes. They mocked him, beat him, and sent him to the Roman governor, Pilate, who sentenced him to die on a cross, a cruel punishment. Jesus was crucified, a crown of thorns on his head, nails in his hands and feet. He suffered but prayed, "Father, forgive them." His mother, Mary, and some disciples watched, heartbroken. For hours, Jesus died and the sky darkened. His body was placed in a tomb, sealed with a stone. His followers thought all hope was lost. But on the third day, something amazing happened. Women visiting the tomb found it empty, the stone rolled away. Angels said, "He is risen." Jesus appeared to them, alive, his body new and strong. He met his disciples, showing them his hands, proving he'd beaten death. For 40 days he taught them, then rose to heaven, promising to be with them always through God's Spirit. Jesus' life changed the world. His followers spread his message of love and forgiveness, building communities of faith. This story of Jesus is about God coming near, giving everything to save us. For those drifting off to sleep, it's a comforting thought. Jesus is like a light in the dark, a friend who never leaves, offering love that lasts forever, guiding us to God's heart.